Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Will. Whenever we see someone get superpowers, we always tend to ask, how do they work? And in this video, we're gonna ask and answer that question. Join us as we take a deep dive into the boys' verse as we study the physiology of the character, the Deep. Let's get to it.
You shut the fuck up!
Quick show of hands. Who here still thinks that the Deep is just an affable, goofy, misguided character? If you raised your hand, we feel sorry for you because, to us, he's chosen what he wants to be. And what he wants to be is a leader of the Manosphere, which, ironically enough, is also the name of his podcast. But you know what is far more interesting than his personal and political views? His physiology. Because the Deep has one of the most complex physiologies out of any Supe in the boys' universe. And in this video, we'll break it all down. So, without further ado, let's get right to it. How did Compound V design the Deep's body as an aquatic organism rather than a baseline human with a single extra power? To understand why the Deep's physiology is so complex and different from other Supes, we need to accept that, unlike most Supes, whose bodies maintain the same physiological appearance and functionality as a human being's with superhuman enhancements and abilities layered on top, his body mutated completely. Compound V didn't just give Kevin Moskowitz the ability to breathe underwater and call it a day. It transformed him into a human-amphibian hybrid, which is much bigger than it sounds. In biological terms, all Supes are technically mutants. The V targets their genetic information and transforms it after being injected into their bodies as infants. This is why the whole Supe minority discourse from the show is as revolting as it is true, because they really are the world's smallest minority. But for most other Supes, that transformation is internal, like Starlight's ability to manipulate electricity or Homelander's laser eyes. The only other character we can even compare Deep to is Rock Hard, because, like the volcanic wonder, Deep's transformation was both internal and external. His entire being was rebuilt to function as a mammalian and aquatic organism. He doesn't just survive underwater briefly like a diver holding his breath. He can remain submerged indefinitely, withstand freezing ocean temperatures, navigate through the dark depths, and physically operate in a dense pressurized liquid environment completely naturally. Those aren't isolated powers, they're interconnected survival systems. And to achieve all of that, his particular V injection needed to alter everything about his baseline human physiology. The Deep's respiratory system, blood circulation, sensory processing, musculature, skin tolerance, pressure resistance, all of it was redesigned into a single integrated package optimized for the deep waters of this world. This is why he calls himself amphibious, and should be seen less as the fish guy, as Starlight puts it, and more as Vought's foremost marine specialist. The most common joke about him is that Vought markets him like a novelty mascot, because it plays well for his brand. But, in reality, he possesses one of the most radically redesigned bodies in the entire franchise. But idle words can't fully represent the truth, can they? So, let's start dissecting everything we just mentioned about his physiology. How do the Deep's hybrid lungs and gills actually split the work of breathing, and what does that mean for his day-to-day physiology? In Season 1, we saw the Deep spending a lot of time underwater with absolutely no signs of duress on his face or in his body language. This is our clearest signal that there's a dual respiratory architecture built into his baseline anatomy. To put it simply, he has two oxygen intake systems, a standard set of lungs that is common for all human bodies, and an additional set of specialized gills layered on top of that. His lungs handle normal atmospheric breathing like ordinary humans, and the gills on his torso extract dissolved oxygen out of the water, like they do in aqueous life forms. This is why we say that his breathing doesn't have an on-off switch that he flips based on his environment. Rather, the truth about his respiratory systems is hidden in the transition between those environments. A normal diver moving from air to water would experience panic, feel the sting of pressure shock, and be hyper-focused on oxygen management. But Deep slips underwater, as if he is moving from one room to another, which suggests that his circulatory system is built to reroute blood seamlessly between pulmonary oxygenation and branchial oxygenation without the risk of air embolisms and complete respiratory collapse. This basically means that his body can decide whether he breathes via his lungs or his gills unconsciously, which also implies that his autonomous nervous system is operating on 2 levels as well. The first level is land, obviously, but the second is the sea, where it also naturally filters out things like salt and silt to ensure maximum oxygenation. This is also why being underwater is Deep's natural habitat and primary comfort zone. On land, he is simply using the human half of the system, whereas underwater, he is completely engaging his mutated physiology with what the V fundamentally designed him to trust. Why are the Deep's gills both his most intimate feature and one of the biggest physical weaknesses? Ever wondered why Deep keeps his gills covered all the time, apart from not wanting to discuss Homelander? Well, the answer is quite simple actually. His ocean lungs are essentially outside his body. The Boys production team emphasized that the Deep's gills are living, moving tissue rather than decorative prosthetics or costume details. And this brings us to an important functional point about gills in general. They aren't just dead slits in the skin that allow water to go in. Gills have to be richly vascular, constantly moist and densely packed with nerves, because they'll only function properly if they remain exposed enough to exchange oxygen efficiently with water. That is why gill tissue is thin, sensitive, and impossible to armor without compromising their function, which could be the reason behind Deep being incredibly dumb when he's fully suited. His vital respiratory organs are in a place where normal humans aren't, and insufficient respiration is one of the leading causes of brain damage, which, we hate to say it, is evident in Deep. This is also why his gills are his biggest weakness, because whenever they're grabbed or struck, it isn't the same as getting punched in the stomach. It's closer to someone shoving their hand directly into an internal organ. And we know what happens to humans when someone attacks their internal organs in that fashion, don't we? Deep's reaction to him being assaulted in Sandusky by a quote-unquote super fan makes this weakness even more evident. The moment she forces her fingers into his gills openings, he loses all physical control despite being vastly stronger than she is, collapsing into panic and excruciating pain. The same thing happens in Season 4 when he fights Starlight and Butcher alongside his best bro, Noir 2. This is why his gills are both a blessing and a curse, because he needs them to operate at maximum capacity, but he also needs to constantly protect them due to their extreme sensitivity. How does the Deep's body survive cold, darkness, and pressure at depths lethal to normal humans? When Deep said he swum in the Mariana Trench, it came off as a pathetic boast in front of the other impossible feats that his teammates can perform. But it also quietly implied a much more extreme physiological adaptation than we initially registered. The deep ocean is an environment where sunlight disappears, temperatures are just a few degrees above freezing, and pressure is at a level that crushes even reinforced equipment, let alone the human body. That's the main reason why both space and the depths of Earth's oceans are the largest uncharted territories for humanity. And yet, Deep treats the latter as natural, navigable territory. His Mariana Trench boast, well self-reported, is also consistent with him recovering Translucent's body and the Flight 37 footage from the bottom of the Atlantic, which isn't a chill swim by any means. To do this, his physiology has to be biochemically stable under compression, because deep water pressure can disrupt circulation, synaptic firing, and even interfere with how proteins hold their shape. So, for him to function normally at those depths, the compound V must have hardened his connective tissues, reinforced his cellular membranes, made his homeostatic thermometer extremely dynamic, and altered his eye structures to make them capable of functioning with almost no light, like the rod cells found in deep-sea fish's eyes in real life. To put it simply, Deep's organs are built to operate in an alien habitat where human physiology starts failing almost immediately. And this is why he's more than just a swimmer with plot armor. What exactly is the Deep doing when he talks to fish? And how does aquatic telepathy work as a biological, neurological power? The Deep talking to fish sounds as silly as Aquaman talking to fish, which is who he's based on. But it also undercuts what's actually happening here, and what makes it possible. Deep can psychically communicate with all forms of sea creatures, hold full conversations with them, and force them to obey him whenever necessary. This isn't simple animal training like a dolphin handler using whistles to direct behavior. he can receive information, transmit his intentions, and coordinate with marine life as if his brain can interface directly with non-human nervous systems. The most biologically plausible reason for this is that Compound V gave the Deep a specialized telepathic two-way radio system tuned specifically to aquatic brains. To put it simply, his nervous system seems able to convert thoughts and speech into simple directive patterns marine animals can understand, while simultaneously translating their sensory and emotional feedback into human-like meaning inside his own mind. This is how he was able to break that dolphin out of Ocean World when it told him it needed to escape, how he used a porpoise to find Translucent's body, and why he was able to coordinate the pursuit of the boys with a school of sharks. Lucy the whale responded to him, not like a random subservient summoned beast, but like an ally that was beached at exactly the right spot at exactly the right time. And while the rest of the world might ridicule him for this, it also showcases Deep's unique mutation perfectly. What is the Deep's aquatic empathy? And how does his emotional bond with sea creatures shape his behavior and weaknesses? The Deep's aquatic telepathy directly leads to another unique ability of his, aquatic empathy. This is the reason his interactions with sea creatures feel more human than his interactions with actual human beings, which is ironic considering his current stance on aquatic life, but we'll get to that in a moment. From a physiological perspective, his aquatic empathy implies that his telepathy doesn't transmit neural data alone. It also carries over marine animals' emotional states with such intensity that Deep identifies with them more clearly than he does with humans, whose emotions he can only read, not experience. The best example of this is Deep's reaction to Lucy the whale's death. When Butcher drives his speedboat through Lucy, Deep doesn't respond to it like a general response to a loss on the battlefield. He responds like someone watching a trusted companion die in front of him. But he's also facing Homelander in that moment, so he doesn't go beyond asking for time to grieve her. Deep also mentions at one point that dolphins are the funniest creatures in Earth's waters, and his intimate relations with multiple octopuses aren't born from some sort of weird kink. There's genuine emotion involved, as evidenced by his deep regret at having to eat Timothy to keep Homelander in check. This is why his aquatic empathy is both a strength and a liability. It allows him to coordinate sea life with unusual loyalty, but it also means every marine casualty hits him harder than most human casualties ever do. And it's also likely to be the reason behind his new stance on marine life, which is, what does it mean that by the end of Season 4, the Deep has seemingly renounced his connection with aquatic life forms? One of the most disturbing things about Season 4 was Deep renouncing his connection with aquatic life forms by killing his octopus girlfriend because he wants to be seen as a quote-unquote normal person. The man whose identity was built around hearing, protecting, and emotionally bonding with sea creatures begins acting as if those signals no longer exist, which is a form of self-amputation if you think about it. It's not like his physical anatomy has changed. He still has the same gills, the same amphibious body, the same telepathic abilities. What changes is his willingness to listen, which strongly implies his telepathic and empathic powers are not passive radio towers that can never be turned off. If that were the case, he'd have been mentally crushed by millions of simultaneous signals from oceanic beings several years ago. The best possible explanation is that over the years, Deep's mind developed a neural gate that can consciously choose to filter and dampen incoming emotional signals. This is something that he couldn't do when he was 9 years old. When Deep first got his powers, he could hear the lobsters at Red Lobster begging him to save them, but that was involuntary. Over the years, he turned his mental radio to sort, mute, prioritize, and amplify aquatic signals the way a radio operator isolates one blip from an entire sea of static. This protects him from sensory overload, getting distracted, and becoming painfully aware of marine life suffering and his own insecurities. But with his current screw marine life stance, he's closing that neural gate entirely and suppressing a vital sensory organ instead of being selective with it. This doesn't make him stronger like he thinks it does, it just makes him hollow. As he sinks deeper into the abyss for Homelander's approval and embraces increasingly brutal human power games, he's also becoming less himself and more what other people want him to be. The fact that Deep, of all people, is now enjoying sushi is chilling, considering he was genuinely lobbying for increased marine life awareness in Season 1. How strong, durable, and fast is the Deep's baseline body compared to ordinary humans and other Supes? Even though he's distancing himself from the ocean, Deep is still not remotely close to a normal man. He has all the baseline compound V enhancements that all Supes get. Only he's at a level where he can join the Seven, and no one bats an eye at the decision. We've seen him knock armed attackers unconscious, crush a man's skull with a single blow, lift and transport marine animals weighing hundreds of pounds, and trade blows with other Seven members like Starlight and A-Train without sustaining critical injuries. Deep is also such an excellent swimmer that if Supes weren't banned from the Olympics, he'd have beaten Michael Phelps' record. So, the fairest way to classify him is as a mid to upper tier Supe in terms of physicality, because he is clearly above Supes like Black Hole in terms of his physical strength. The only reason he looks weaker than he is because he's always surrounded by Supes that are absurdly powerful like Homelander, Queen Maeve, and Soldier Boy. Their presence takes away from the fact that Deep is still a dangerous combatant with advanced martial arts skills, and that matters because his aquatic specialization doesn't bring him up to standard Supe durability. It is stacked on top of it. And that also comes into play with his next point we want to address. How dependent is the Deep's performance on being in or near water, and what happens when he is forced to be a land Supe? The Deep remains superhuman on land, but land is clearly not the environment his body was optimized to dominate. This is the core misunderstanding behind his reputation as the weakest member of the Seven. But the truth is that he is an aquatic specialist who is repeatedly deprived of most of his natural advantages. Water and land demand opposite things from muscle use, balance, and force distribution. On land, efficient combat favors explosive vertical leverage, stable footing, and rigid transfer of power through the hips and shoulders. In water, efficient movement translates to continuous propulsion, flexible directional control, low drag, and sustained endurance against resistance from every angle. The Deep consistently looks far more natural in the second category than the first. When submerged or even operating near open water, he has access to his full respiratory system, marine telepathic network, hydrodynamic mobility, and that is also when his sensory awareness is operating at maximum efficiency. But in urban environments, that support and strengthening network disappears, which is why we often see him losing to people like that Superfan and Starlight when he would have owned them had they been anywhere near the water. This environmental mismatch also explains why his exile arc feels so disproportionate and dysfunctional. Yes, he is psychologically humiliated and stripped of status, but he is also physically marooned from the one thing that makes his body function the way it was meant to function. The most appropriate comparison for this mismatch would be a fighter jet. An F-15 can still move on a runway, but that doesn't mean the runway is where it was built to win. That is essentially the Deep on land. He's still dangerous, still enhanced, but disconnected from the medium that makes his anatomy complete. His weakness isn't a simple lack of power. It's operating in the wrong habitat for the kind of organism he truly is. And that is why we don't see him get too many wins on land. How does the Deep's body heal from injury, and what does his recovery rate suggest about his cellular repair systems? Like most people with compound V in their veins, the Deep's body can repair damage much faster than a normal human body. And his anatomy in particular might allow him to heal faster given the existence of his gills. Whenever his exposed respiratory tissue is attacked, he is left screaming and incapacitated by the agonizing pain and destruction of sensitive biological material. Yet he is not permanently maimed by those experiences or visibly scarred in a major way. This suggests that his body performs accelerated tissue reconstruction beneath the surface, especially in soft structures like his gills that are constantly exposed to mechanical stress. Compound V would almost need to provide this, because an organism whose respiratory organs sit externally on the torso would otherwise suffer repeated infections, tears, and long-term damage from routine contact alone. In that sense, his accelerated healing factor is less a flashy bonus power and more required cellular maintenance infrastructure. His anatomy is too exposed and too specialized to remain functional under ordinary human recovery limits, or even Supe recovery limits, which is why he heals faster than many lower-level Supes. How is the Deep's hearing and situational awareness altered by his aquatic physiology? While all Supes have a baseline level of super hearing, in the context of Deep's amphibious body, that is more significant than it first appears. Hearing underwater is a completely different challenge compared to hearing in air. Sound travels faster, farther, and often through vibrations, as much as through open acoustic waves in water. A normal human ear performs poorly in that medium, because it is built for atmospheric pressure and airborne sound conduction. The Deep, however, navigates underwater environments with none of that confusion, which suggests his sensory organs are designed to process both systems. This suggests that his inner ear and balance structures are unusually pressure stable and vibration sensitive, which allow him to detect shifts in water movement, distant impacts, animal motion, and low-frequency disturbances traveling through the surrounding fluid. This stability also expands his situational awareness dramatically because he doesn't have to see a threat to react like a normal person. The Deep may be able to sense something large moving long before visual confirmation, the same way sharks or marine mammals respond to disturbances outside direct sight. On land, his enhanced hearing contributes to faster reaction times, but underwater, it becomes a surveillance amplifier. It turns the ocean from a visually limited dark space into an information-rich field full of echoes, tremors, and directional cues his body knows how to decode. What biological and psychological cost does the Deep pay when his aquatic plans catastrophically fail, like the Lucy whale incident? The Lucy disaster is usually remembered as one of the boy's darkest punchlines, but for the Deep, it goes deeper than losing an asset or a soldier. He essentially witnesses a friend he personally summoned and emotionally bonded with die in front of him because of his own decisions. His first reaction to Lucy's death isn't anger or disappointment, it's grief. And that reaction suggests that his aquatic empathy extends to catastrophic failures as well. Every time he recruits sea life into an operation, he is extending his own nervous system into another living body. So when that body is mutilated or killed, the failure rebounds inward as more than embarrassment. It becomes a compound shock made of guilt, self-blame, and sensory trauma. The very system that makes him effective underwater now becomes associated with helplessly watching a bonded creature die because of him. This likely creates hesitation the next time he tries mobilizing aquatic life, because he is no longer issuing commands from a position of confidence. There is a personal loss attached to it. And that loss goes beyond psychological damage, affecting his biological ability to summon and coordinate with marine life effectively, making it both difficult and terrifying. This also explains why the Deep's decision to cut off marine life forms entirely is making him physically weaker. To escape emotional pain, he is effectively cutting out emotion itself, and that isn't healthy for his mental or physical health. Consequently, he can't operate at maximum output, creating a self-predatory loop that keeps him stuck in the Manosphere mindset. And, ironically enough, the only way for him to escape that loop is another duet with Patton Oswalt. Only this time, he can't go back to his old life with the Seven. We hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive into the Deep's physiology, because this is all we've got for you today. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content from the Boysverse, one last time. We'll see you soon with yet another great video, so until then, stay safe, don't deny your emotions, and have a great day.